Welcome, everyone. Another edition of the live Q&A with Dr. Rob. Dr. Rob is joining tonight to answer questions. If you're watching this recording, guess what? You could join us live. It's Monday nights at 5 p.m. Pacific time. Almost every week we had a week off between Christmas and New Year's, but otherwise we're around. So we would invite you to join us on this and the many other webinars. You can join anonymously, ask questions if you choose to of the host, the guest. I have some special edition ones coming up. I'm excited about, as always, as well as the regular people. And John Taylor did a fantastic one again last Thursday. I just like he has such an amazing insight on so many things, and it's always just a gift for me to get to participate in those. So if you haven't seen that one, check that out. I mentioned before I hit record, Dr. Rob's podcast, Sex, Love, and Addiction, has had about 3 million downloads. 3 million downloads. Great content there. I would encourage you to. These are all free resources. Drop-in groups, webinars, podcasts, previously recorded webinars are all free resources for you to help navigate this space, on this journey. So, and now we've got questions, Dr. Rob.
Yay.
Oh, remember how you were talking about the cutting board last week? First question. Did you tell your husband about the cutting board? How did it go?
Well, I think a better question is, what was the response I got?
Well, you had to tell him first, and how did it go?
It was as expected, which, okay, I'm just going to tell you, I've told you that, if you just start listening to me, these things wouldn't happen. And the truth is, if I did, they wouldn't. Because I sort of, oh yeah, that's fine, but I'll do this like an addict, right? Something else came up recently. I don't remember what it was. And he said, remember when I told you that? And I think by this, in case there are any spouses listening, perhaps you've heard this before. It's not just an addict issue, but it's a men's issue, which is I can handle this. But if you have it happen, if it happens enough times, you might want to say, I might consider what my spouse is saying, because if you're being honest, you're going to hear about it later. And I deserved it. I mean, it was very polite. She said, maybe you should. So answer is yes.
Good job. I almost texted you later, but I decided not to go there. So, okay. So the next question, but thanks for asking. Thanks for remembering. I feel like most discussions and books on sex addiction talk about couples working together to get in a better place. How often do betrayed partners decide not to stay and not to do any work and try to stay because they're lying and the betrayal is just too painful and they don't see any future? Okay, this is a bunch of little questions in one thing. So let's start with, there is a lot of information about couples navigating the space and working together. I often point towards Dr. Rob's podcast, which I mentioned a few minutes ago, on sex, love, and addiction with Dr. Stan Tatkin, called We Do. And I love that one because even if you take it out of the addiction arena, that's about couples navigating relationships, kind of like the cutting board. We're gonna do this thing called life. It's not gonna be.
I'll never hear the end of that. Just say it.
Well, no, I know, but we got a lot of mileage out of that one. But it's one of those things where it's like you're not gonna do it perfectly, but how do you do this, and how do you keep focused on things? So you're right on that level. We did a series. Should I stay or should I go? I send that series out. There's a series of webinars. When I turn this over to Dr. Rob, I'll pull that link to the blog. I wrote a blog because I was sending out the 4 different pieces of the webinar so often. I was like, well, this is silly. So I wrote a blog that has all the links. So I'll give you that link in just a moment. As for statistics, yes, there are lots of people who choose to go, that just go, yeah, this isn't what I signed up for, or as someone comes into recovery. So let's say the betraying partner is on a recovery path, and you're different people on some level, hopefully different people, and there just isn't the willingness to do the work anymore. It's different, whatever. There's lots of different reasons. There are a number of partners that get stuck and Dr. Rob can talk more about this too, but you're the problem, you get fixed. I've got no part in this. It's all on you. And that can really be painful and damaging for a relationship too. So yes, And you know what? There's no judgment. Everybody has to choose, for themselves what their path is. But as far, I love statistics. So, I was like,
He
oh, that would be
does.
really, I know, that'd be really interesting to know. And nobody's doing any research on that kind of stuff. It's probably, I mean, like this is really painful stuff, but like the loss of a child or any big event, that can negatively, a child with health issues. There's lots of things that can negatively impact a relationship. So, this is a traumatic and I mean, whether it's substance or sex or whatever, there's lots of things that erode in a relationship. So I'm going to go grab that link. What are your thoughts on all of those pieces?
Well, for you who are ever watching me, just know when I look down to the right and I'm writing notes on what you might, I'm not chatting with friends or, so just to say it. So I have all kinds of things, which is how long is a relationship? Have you been together 30 years? Have you been together 3 years? Do you have children?
Great
What is the
point. Yeah.
status of your living situation? I mean, uh, feelings are not facts, as Tammy would say. And so what you're feeling, I completely understand because I haven't been betrayed like you have, and I haven't lived with it in the way you have. But the way you're feeling, and I guess I wrote this down too, I wouldn't leave in anger. I think you have to come to a place with yourself where you're at peace with this. Um, I say this to the guys all the time, and I'll say it to you spouses in a different way. I have men who come in and say, I just don't know which one. Is it her or him, or they just can't decide who to be with. But they're going to leave. And I say, you know what? Maybe you should be with, maybe you should do everything you can to try to make your relationship work. Therapy, 12-step support groups, whatever it takes. Because I want you to leave the relationship feeling like you did everything you could. And I don't want you to look back 5 years later. And I've had some of the men say this, and gee, I could have stayed in that relationship if I just did this, that, and the other. So, and I don't saying you'd have to do anything. You can go with your heart. I'm just saying I would want to leave a relationship that is deeply troubled, especially a long-term one, knowing I had done everything I can to my own satisfaction. So I didn't look back later and say, why did I do that? Um, a couple of different things. Don't threaten to leave. This is a rule, because what you tell us, we listen to as addicts. And if you tell me I'm leaving you if you do this or that, and then you don't leave when I do this or that, well, I have learned a lesson, which is I can get away with stuff, and you're just going to say whatever you're going to say. And so, if you're going to make threats, and it's not even a threat; it's a statement. If you do this, then I will do that. Then I think you have to decide that you're going to follow through. Um, what else? What kind of support do you have? Are you in support groups? Are you going to therapy? Are you working on these things directly, together and separately? I didn't say anything about 12-step meetings or support groups, or what are you doing to try to find your way through this? And Tammy will tell you a lot of the support groups with women, this comes up all the time. You would be the first one. And I think it's really important to hear how other people are questioning and what they're questioning about. Um, I guess the last thing, and I wrote this down, is well, I kind of said it already, but um, how deep has your connection been and love been, and how much meaning was in the relationship before all of this came out? Because I certainly do have spouses, and I understand this, say, I don't know if anything we've had is ever true or has ever been true. And therefore, I don't know who you are, I don't know who we are, and I'm not sure I can make this work. Um, I would say that if you have had meaningful and deep loving relationship, I wouldn't end it over this. I do think if there's affairs, I mean, certainly you can separate, certainly you can take time out, but I wouldn't leave again because something has happened. You found out something. Um, Tammy said this earlier, and I really, really agree, which is, you have to find your own peace with yourself. And spouses, this is, I think, the hardest thing. And Tammy she's nodding her head, she agrees. The hardest thing for the spouse of any addict is to say, no matter what they do, I'm going to be okay. And I don't think that, and I understand, and it's impossible in the beginning to not, where are they going and what are they doing? And I want to track them. And you have to do that in the beginning. You don't know what the heck has gone on in your relationship, what the heck. But you cannot let your own peace of mind at some point ride on my mistakes and my craziness. At some point, you have to be in a place where, you know what? Well, I tell this story a lot, but I'll say briefly. I was very briefly. I was in a group with a woman whose husband had acted out, and they'd been together a very long time. And she was working a good Al-Anon, a good sort of distancing, good boundaries program for herself. And she had acted out, and she was in a group. One of the women said in the group said, "How could you possibly stay with him having acted out?" And she said, "Well, I'm not going to ruin my life. I'm not going to have to lose my house, my kids, separate us, and go through all of that nightmare because let him fix himself. Meanwhile, I'm going to go on with my life." And I think that once you can find a life that is meaningfully, and by the way, I'm going on and on, but those of us in loving relationships, we kind of lose touch with our friends. We kind of lose touch with the things we love doing. You have kids, whatever. And I think part of the road is really re-engaging with what makes you happy, us aside. I'm not saying you will ever separate with peace and love and kumbaya, but at least you will have a place to go inside of you that you can feel safe no matter what happens with us. And Tammy, could you just add to that? I know I said a lot, but that's a real tough one to detach like that. Can you just?
It is, and I love what you're talking about with I've done everything I needed to do in order to know that I made the right decision. And even with that, I hear people I we did a webinar with a woman who did her name is Carolyn. She did the Betrayal podcast series season 4, and she came on, and we could not record it, so you won't find a recording of this uh, because of her contractual obligations. But she talked about, she was in a group, and she was feeling like there were people who left really quickly, and there were people who stayed. She was one that had left sooner, but the magnitude of what she dealt with and institutional trauma, I mean, it was horrific. So and there was no, he wasn't doing recovery, all of those things. And she made the decision. And then she was second guessing herself, and she was going, did I do everything I possibly could have? And someone else in the group said, I've worried the other way of like, did I stay too long? And so there's always going to be a little bit of the I wonder about, but I think at some point when you choose, if you make that decision that you just go, this is what I'm choosing to do
Right.
based on the information that I have now, and what I'm seeing, not lip service from an addict partner, that's what you're choosing to do. I did put the link for the should I stay or should I go? And I loved the first one. I loved all of them, but the first one, Kristen Snowden shared out of Dr. John Gottman's work, 10 questions to ask yourself. Journal about those. I invite both parties to journal about it because, as Dr. Rob, he does expert consultations. So a little side note, he does expert consultation with couples. And part of what he's trying to navigate is how into the relationship each person is.
Hmm.
He talked about, if you're in a relationship for 30 years, you have a lot more into the relationship, you have a lot more history, than somebody who's been in there for 3 years, and so there's going to be that time frame, that could be, could play, a part of it. But that first webinar, Kristen talks about 10 questions to ask yourself. Ideally, both of you are doing this and you're kind of going like, okay, we're both 80% in, great. That's very hopeful. If you're both 20% in, then probably, it probably isn't something that's meant to be for the long haul, Then separately, we did collaborative divorce. And we've done mediation, we've done collaborative divorce, we've done
On the
therapeutic
podcast.
separation on
Right.
podcasts and webinars. There's both. And you can email TAMI at seekingintegrity.com if you want links into those specific, but we have resources
Hmm.
just educational for you to consider. Like, I think it's really important. We did, and the should I stay or should I go, there's one on mediation. What does that look like? And then we had one on the legal, and our CEO is also an attorney, and he was on, and he shared, if you're expecting the legal system, to give you that emotional support, it doesn't. It's not. That's
Hmm.
not what it's designed for. So if you're going, I'm going to do this, and it's going to, like, so I'm going to feel better, that's not what a legal system is. So just having your eyes open to what you're, that will help you make a decision that will be the best choice for you. I also think it's really important to have your little tribe around you. Make sure that you've got people, like
Hmm.
your family. They're always going to be the, get rid of the bum, or
Right.
whatever. They're going to be advocating for you probably. So having people that can help you, look at this, from a different trajectory could be useful. So making sure you're getting the input so that when you make a decision, I often say, I can see. I work with a lot of partners. I work with addicts too, but I can see when they're trying to decide, and I can hear their words saying one thing, but their heart isn't there yet. And then, sometimes it takes some time, but then you see their heart and their head align, and then they have a decision. And I see that they're comfortable with that decision at that point too. There may be a little bit of wiggle. Oh, yeah, and there's grief and loss and all of those things. So it's complicated. How's that? And I wish I had all the data and the stats for you, but I don't. But here's the deal, each couple is themselves. It's just they're one. And their results are based on what they're willing to do. And so I don't care if it was 1%, chance. If you guys are the ones that are willing to do the work, amazing things can happen. So as much as I like stats in addiction world, it's not very useful because it really is about the
People aren't always
individuals.
honest.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Well, they aren't
It's
honest,
so
but it's also,
shameful. Hmm.
like the odds of me being in long-term recovery are really minute. And I have a really nice chip, which means I've been in recovery for a long time. So if I base it on, well, there's no hope. And I was like, people gave me enough hope to continue to do the work. So it's really, what are you willing to do in order to heal and be on a recovery path?
Since we only have two questions so far, I
Yeah.
wanted to say a couple other things, which is something that Tammy said earlier. And this is a simple thing I do with couples when I do consultations, and they're 2 hours. I meet with couples.
Via
Tammy can,
Zoom
if
all
you
over the
want,
world.
TAMI, Seeking Integrity. Tammy can sort of direct you. But there are a couple of things I wrote. One of the things is, what steps have you taken? Because separation, have you separated? And by the way, separation is not, well, we just separation, and it is in the podcast. I don't know if it's collaborative separation. That's not the right term.
No,
What's
no,
the
no.
name?
It's therapeutic separations through Dr.
Therapeutic.
Stevie Hall
All right.
and Lindsay Stanley, but I'm also finding the webinar. I got it. So
So these folks, Dr. Lindsay Hall and and
no,
Stanley,
opposite. Dr. Stevie Hall and Lindsay Stanley.
right? They wrote a great workbook on
Mm-hmm.
separation, and I did two podcasts with them, and
Mm-hmm.
I was fascinated because what a separation is and how it works and what are the details, and how often do we see each other? What about money? What about family? What about phone call? All of that is discussed beforehand, so there aren't any. We're separated. We're talking every night. There need to be rules, and I would say to you very clearly, if you were considering leaving, do a separation if you can. And people even do an in-house separation, which sounds really crazy. But one of the things they said, Tammy, which I loved, was consider yourselves roommates. Roommates don't have sex, roommates just sleep in the same bed. Think about, at least that is a way to frame it. But I really would take it step by step. What does leaving mean? There was something. Oh, so when we run a residential treatment program, and we have only 8 men, and I work with them regularly. And of course, when you spouses are so angry and so hurt, and the guys are saying, I never know if we're going to make it, and maybe the relationship isn't meant to be, and maybe she's going to leave me, and she's yelling at me all the time, whatever it is, I remind them, and I'll say to you that that anger means you're still in. If I am furious at you, I am deeply emotionally attached. You have really hurt me, and I'm furious. If the best sign that I can give you that a relationship is really ending is apathy, that you simply say, well, I don't really care whether you stay or go. When you're at that point where it isn't deeply emotionally reactive, but you're kind of, you're done. You're done. And so I would really observe, I can't stay because I'm furious and hurting. And well, maybe you need to create different circumstances. But if you're real angry, you're still in the game. And for all of you very angry spouses, even if you wish you were out or you want to get out, check your emotional state, because I think that's a very good indicator. And as Tammy said, one more thing, one of the things I do when I do consultations, I'll say to the spouse, 0 is you're out, and 100 is you're absolutely in. What do you have to say? And the spouse will give me a number. And then I'll go to the addict and I'll say, okay, 0 is you're not working on this, you're done with them. And 100 is I'll do anything to stay. And I think I know that sounds silly, but I really get to hear, and I often hear, the spouse is at 60%, 40%, and that addict, when they're in trouble, they're at 100%. But are they really? So again, there's so many ways to look at this. I do hope you reach out. By the way, anyone who's listening to this or watching this, seekingintegrity.com, seekingintegrity.com, all one word. That is where all these resources are. And I mean, 80% of them are free. So I would suggest take a look, and you can find all these things. Tell me one more thing to say. I've been
Mhm.
doing this for almost 30 years. And I can say to you that maybe 80% of the couples I work with stay together. A great deal of them stay together, and it's because they have so much more going on than this. And as hurt and angry, they have had good times. They have had meaningful moments. They do, as Tammy said, share family, share church, share. So is it worth giving up all that for this? I give it time and see if that intensity and that pain, wears down. But I will say, and you don't have to do this because I said it, but about 80% of the couples who've been together for quite a while stay together. That's been my experience. And the ones who haven't, we've been dating for 2 years and we just got married. They don't have as much to lose. So they're emotionally, yes, but in terms of the world and they're living together. So they tend to stay together less. Boy, we talked about that question, Debbie.
We did.
Lots
And
to
and
say.
I put a bunch of links in the chat so you can find those too. I feel I have a compulsive relationship with porn that acts as emotional regulation. So I wonder if that is sex addiction. So I'm going to
Love this
let you
question.
answer that, but I'm going to put in the chat. We have a little self-assessment, and I'm going to put that in
Ah,
that just went in the chat. It's on our
here are
homepage. If
some
you're
things.
watching this, seekingintegrity.com homepage.
And here are some questions, and you can take a look at it. And there's a scale. So you
Mm-hmm.
can just get a sense for yourself. It's not an absolute, doctor
Mm-mm.
told me. You're going to need more investigation, but there is some information you can kind of. So I want to give you the standard answer I give for addiction, which is addiction is not, and I'll use alcohol. Okay, alcohol, some people can drink a lot, it's not a problem. Some people drink a lot, it's a nightmare. So what I define addiction about in that case is not how much you drink. It's how is the drinking affecting your life? Are you not coming home on time? Are you driving drunk? Are you having meaningful problems that are affecting your life and functionality related to the drinking? Now, they may not be obvious. It might be your health or it might be people, talk, whatever it is. But to me, the word is functional. Is my life functional? My relationships, my work? Because if it isn't functional, then the amount of whatever it is you're doing, looking at porn for this many hours a day, some people can look regularly, some people can look, longer than whatever, and some people look and it destroys their lives. So how often doesn't necessarily define addiction. And the other thing that doesn't define addiction is what kind. So I may drink whiskey and Tammy may drink wine, but we both may be alcoholics. So if you look at porn and someone else goes to massage parlors, we don't define addiction by that either. But we do define addiction by, is it affecting the functionality of your life? Is the sexual behavior engaging in destroying your marriage? Is it ruining the workplace? So how much time I spend in the experience doesn't mean addiction necessarily. Everyone's different. What kind of thing? I like men, I like women, I like to be tied up. I'm not going I don't make judgments about what people are into. But if what you're into is destroying your life. So bottom line, we define addiction by functionality. So I'm answering your question. Does If you are someone who uses sexuality or porn as a form of emotional regulation, and to those of you who don't know what that means when I'm extremely upset, I turn to the porn and it calms me down. When I'm really excited about something and I want to feel even better, I look at the porn. So it becomes a way to make myself feel better or whatever that is. There are many things that people use for emotional regulation. I watch a little bit too much TV, but that's just me. That it relaxes me. I'm calm. If I'm watching all the time, I wouldn't get any work done. So there are a lot of things we do every single day for emotional regulation. And some people use sex. The question is not, do you use it for that? The question is, how is it affecting your life? So on every level, is something any addiction? Does it destroy your life? And the things are important to you. I have kids who are in college and they can't study because all they do, so their priority is, I can't do the thing that's important to me. Other people are not able to parent their kids. So I want custody. It's such a big issue, Tammy. What are your thoughts?
So I put more resources in the chat. So there is a two-part webinar and there's also podcasts on this. But porn addiction, part one and part two was done early last, I think it was January and February of last year, but I put the direct links in that. I also we have a porn addiction 101 online work group starting this week on the 15th. That is a psychoeducation course online via Zoom. It follows the Porn Addiction 101 book and workbook.
Mhm.
We have a number of work groups. These are low cost, live facilitated. So it's not just watching a video or something, and there's homework to do. Sometimes, well, actually, probably most
Mm.
times, there are people in the groups, and there's separate ones for betrayed partners, and there is a separate one for sex addiction 101. But the porn addiction, if all of the acting out has been online, then that could be a better fit for you. But they're similar. You're gonna have a three circle, a relapse prevention plan. You will have information about what the addiction is and isn't. All of those, sex addiction or porn addiction is not about sex. It's just it is about the escape, dissociation, compulsive behaviors, that was mentioned. So all of these are useful, low cost or free resources that can help you identify. I give lots of recommendations every week for qualified professionals. There's lots of therapists out there. This is not one where those online programs that have a generalist therapist is going to be most useful. It would pay to have you'll get the value out of someone who's trained, specifically for these issues. So, but check this out, 12-step program. We have lots of resources. We did a webinar on the 12-step program. So we have lots of things that can be helpful for you, on this journey. Lean into those, but you're asking a great question. And I really don't know people who ask these questions that aren't struggling with some
Right,
degree of it.
right. You
Like,
don't ask
yeah,
about alcoholism unless you
yeah,
might have a problem.
right. Yeah, I don't have anybody that, when people are calling, I'm wondering if I have a problem. I'm like, well, if you're calling me, you probably do.
Right,
And
right,
and
right,
and
right.
let's get you the help you need. Like, there's
Right.
zero judgment in any of this. So,
Well, and by the way, that's
okay.
like any
Yeah,
visit. Like my knee hurts.
yeah,
If I'm calling the knee doctor, I probably have a knee problem. I did want to
yeah,
say one other thing about this, which is
sure.
educate, educate, educate.
Yeah,
I got free podcasts, listen to them. Um, I, I have a sex addiction 101 book, a porn addiction 101. Even if you don't go to the classes, and I recommend you do because there's homework and workbooks and all that, but nonetheless, learn and learn from qualified sources. I have to say to you guys, and all give it up for AI, which I really enjoy on many levels, and certainly Google. But don't put in their sex addiction expert and expect to find what you need. Don't put in their sex addiction book. Look for the people who have experience. Look for the people who have done this work for a while, and not just pointing to myself, although I am. But there are many people who've written blogs, written books, are experts in the field. Do your research, because online everybody says they do everything, and therapists in particular sometimes, and they mean well, and they may think they can do it, but they don't necessarily know what they're doing. So make sure that you grow and learn. And if you're in a relationship, listen to yourself. Go listen, do these things yourself. Come here, take a listen, see what you think. But I love what you said, Tammy, which is if you think you have a problem, you probably have a problem, because people aren't sex addicts. Don't come here and say stuff like that.
right.
Let's keep going.
Okay. Hello, and thank you both for taking our questions. I am seeking guidance regarding addiction-related concerns and treatment planning. I've been married for 12 years, and my spouse and I have 4 school-aged children. I have a history of struggles with alcohol use and compulsive sexual behaviors. In the past, alcohol use contributed to infidelity and unhealthy sexual behaviors, including pornography use. I want to note that I have not viewed pornography in over a year and no longer experience urges. However, I continue to struggle with alcohol use and aspects of sexual addiction. My wife referred me to your website as a potential source of support and treatment. My primary questions are: which issue should be addressed first in treatment? And addiction management typically a lifelong process, or is there a point at which ongoing treatment may no longer be necessary? I am committed to accountability, recovery, and whatever is needed for my family and myself. Thank you for being here.
Well, the answer is yes.
Yeah.
That was easy.
Yeah.
So the question about multiple addictions is a really important one, and I'll tell you why. I know people. I have friends. I know people who have had sex addiction problems. Certainly, a lot of clients who went into treatment or meaningfully focused in programs that solely focused on the drug and alcohol issue, and they may have learned about it. And oftentimes in those groups, in an alcohol or drug center or an alcohol and drug group, or even with an individual therapist, they may not ask you about sex. They're focused on the drugs and alcohol. And for some people, I think you mentioned this, they're correlated. When you get drunk, you sexually act out. For some people, where I get the drugs, they sexually act out. So for some people, there is a strong interaction. Just to say, this is one of the how do I say this? This is one of the main reasons I have a current residential program is I really am interested in and like working with people who have paired sex and drug addiction because and by the way, the sex addiction folks don't always get the alcohol piece. I'm really interested in both. And I do think there is a relationship. There are many people who take speed, who have certain kinds of trauma and they act out certain ways sexually. I have other people who take drugs and they go unconscious. And, so I do think there is a relationship that is worth looking at when they come together. Which should first come to treatment, dealt with in treatment. So let me speak to alcohol. You're not going to be able to follow any plans. You're not going to keep your commitments if you're drinking. I can say to Tammy, I'm absolutely going to do this. I promise I'm going to do this. Have a couple of drinks. I don't, maybe I'll tell her tomorrow. I mean, I don't, it's easy to get into the dysregulations. You just lose your impulses. So you cannot focus on sexual recovery if you're drinking. Doesn't mean you shouldn't, but I'm just saying in that case, your primary concern is to get sober. And by the way, are you really a sex addict? Yeah, I don't know. What if you only act out when you're drinking? You can't answer those questions. What is it? How do I stop? Unless you stop drinking and using. That's a definite yes. Can you put and define sexual behavior that you're going to avoid? Sure. Can you go to an S meeting once a week, or can you begin to embrace that? Can you go to one of the support groups that we have at the same time as AA? Of course. By the way, there are many, I'm saying a lot of things. There are many, 12-step programs that are wonderful at what they do, but they don't, if you're in AA, you're not supposed to bring up sex. You're not supposed to bring up issues that are unrelated specifically. So you really need to go to a place where they do talk sex. If you're struggling with the inability to do both, that is why I created residential for people who they stop drinking and they start using, or they start using and they start sexing. As Tammy would say, it's whack-a-mole. So if no matter what you do, there's new behaviors, you're going to have to address at least the leading ones. When you say I'm committed to accountability, recovery, and doing whatever is needed for my family and myself, I don't agree. I'm sorry. I think you may say
I'm
that to
with you.
yourself. I
Yeah.
understand you could catch that, Tammy. Well, why don't you go ahead and answer that one then? Because I've turned the lights off. It's blinking. Can you answer the question? Am I committed to accountability? I thought that might catch you.
Yes. And I hear this often, and then it's like, well, like we start making really useful suggestions. You're struggling with stuff. You want to get the best level of help. The Seeking Integrity Residential Treatment Program is the only program that is really holistic, that is going to look at all of those things, and you'll have a plan. 14, 21, or 28-day length of stay. You would not be a 14-day candidate when there's co-occurring addictions. I'm just telling you, we're seeking integrity. I try really hard to have integrity about all things. And we even have a length of treatment on our website. And I put the link already in the chat. You can take a look at that. There's support for partners, not from a therapy standpoint, but support. You would have a plan that would help you. You have 4 kids. I can't impress upon you enough. Do this for you, but do this for your family. There's a program called Adult Children of Alcoholics, and there's a book about adult children of sex addicts. There's not for school age children and all of this kind of stuff, but even should you tell them? Absolutely not. Sometimes kids find stuff, and that's a whole nother topic. I won't even go off on that tangent, but the dysregulation, the emotional current in the house, kids pick up on that and they automatically assume it's them and all of those things. You getting healthy for you, for your spouse, for your children, I always say, I wish I could wave a magic wand and you could see how good this can be. You have young enough kids that you can, you can change it and mitigate, anything. Like, you can learn and you can show them, what living in integrity is like. So my first response is residential treatment. And if you're going, well, we can't do this, we can't, like you just said, I'm willing to do anything. And then people usually balk at that. And I'm not saying you are. You may be sitting there going, like, I'm signing up now. Great. I also put the Sex Addiction 101 work group that starts, I think, in February. I forgot to look at that. That is only one aspect, but Scott will be teaching that particular round, and he's very good at having holistic, you know, program or holistic relapse prevention plans. Like your inner circle would have alcohol and sex and porn and whatever else, food, whatever, because stopping the compulsive behavior so that there isn't a lifeline. Dr. David Fawcett has a Tuesday night drop-in group free for those men who have been struggling with co-occurring substances, whatever form of substance it is, and sex porn, addiction. That is one place where you can go talk about that. And Dr. I'm reaching into my magic
Yeah, you're
cupboard.
reaching to the sky
I
because
know, but yeah, so and this book won't save you, but Sex Under the Influence, about sexualized drug abuse. Like all of these are resources and none of them are enough. You talk about, like, will you always have to be in treatment? And I think it depends on what you call treatment. Like I'm in recovery. I live in active recovery. I still go to my 12-step meetings. I do my meditation. I do my daily things that I need to do. I don't go to a 12-step meeting every day like I used to when I was first was in and for a long time. I don't do that anymore, but I still go to 12-step meetings on a very regular basis. I want to. Those are like, it's good for me to remember. So it changes. Like, do I need the intense help that I needed, when I first started this? No, I'm in a much different place, and I have tools that I can actually know how to use now. I didn't then. So it changes and it shifts. And if you really set a solid foundation early on, then you have that to build on. So my key is get a solid foundation. Where can you get one? Oh, Seeking Integrity Residential Treatment Program is, but
yeah,
sorry. I mean, like you
we do
have
good work.
so much, I know, but yeah, and it is the most expert residential treatment program for these issues. We've had guys that have gone to all the other treatment programs, and unfortunately, if they've needed more help, they've come to us and they affirm that what we do is different. It's very specific, and it isn't, 60 or 90 days. This isn't just about warehousing people. We want them to have the tools that they need. So I will get off my podium, but
I know because I want to
yeah,
add something, but you're not
yeah,
on a
please.
podium.
Yeah.
Um, but you are my hero. So I want to say that with all due respect, you're not committed to accountability recovery. Those are words. But if you wrote, I've been going to 12-step meetings 4 days a week, and I've been going to a therapist, and I've been I have a sponsor, and I've written down my behavior. If you said I've gone through all these steps and I'm really struggling, I would say, oh, wow, you've been really committed to accountability recovery. If you, okay, I'm be calm about this. If you're saying I'm committed to accountability, then you shouldn't be able to there's no reason to ask the question because you wouldn't have to tell me that. You would already know what you were. So what I ask you back to you is, what have you done? What is the path you've been on? Have you gone to meetings? Do you have a therapist? Do you have a sponsor? Are you working on clarity? Do you go to a men's group? Have you considered residential? Are you in AA? Are you listening to all these groups? Are you listening to all the podcasts? Are you doing everything that you can find to try to get better? Reading every book, listening to every podcast. And then I'll say, oh, wow, this person have a meaningful, deep commitment to accountability, but they're spinning their wheels. And how sad that is that they've tried so hard and they're not getting anywhere. And that is, by the way, when people go to residentials, when they've done everything. So I don't know what you meant by treatment, because treatment, and Tammy was talking about, treatment could be residential, it usually is, but it can mean all the way to, seeing a therapist or whatever. But I would ask you, and you're right, Tammy, about this, TAMI at Seeking Integrity. I'm doing these 5 things. What am I missing? And she'll say, listen to this podcast, or you should, Tammy's always glad to write a note back to someone else. Ask, go to I'm sorry. We have all these support groups that are free for sex addicts. Go in there and say, what are you folks doing? This is what I'm doing. So you may be doing every single thing and you're going to everything that's possible, but your commitment to it, I'm glad for you. I hope you are committed, but commitment is not the same as actions. And I want to ask you, what are your actions that demonstrate your commitment? And my guess would be you'd already know that and wouldn't be asking that question if you have. So get to work is my answer to you. And Yeah. And start with us, go backwards, start with the beginning, go forward. Doesn't matter. Just get to work. Oh, I do want to say one
And
more thing. I can't stop.
please.
Your children.
Hmm.
I've had so many men that I work with in treatment say, well, I've been a terrible husband, but I've been a great dad. And I
Hmm.
will say to them, and they're like, well, I took the kids to do this, and I went for this, and I went to their school, and I played ball, whatever it is. And I'll say, but have you been a supported husband? Have you been a loving partner to your wife or the mother of your children? Because if you've left her feeling vulnerable, unsupported, anxious, wondering where you are, wondering if you've left them feeling uncomfortable, unsafe, how can they be the best mother that they want to be? So protecting my family and watching out for my family isn't just working on myself or looking out. It is, people who have kids and have these issues, they're not emotionally present. They're not their kids, or what are their kids watching? What are they learning in this relationship, watching you and your spouse? So we're going to stop, but I will say to you that there's so many pieces to this. And what else I want to say? I think that's it. Um,
Okay.
yeah, that's it.
Okay. We have more questions.
Yeah.
Betray partner here. D-Day was 2.5 years ago. I've been doing S&on for a year plus seeing my own therapist. My husband is a sex addict and has been going to SAA for 2 years, working the steps, has a sponsor and a CSAP. We just started couples therapy. Everything is going well as we continue to both recover. I was wondering what your take on masturbation is. We are deciding whether to bring masturbation back. So as long as no devices are involved, what are your thoughts? This is for you.
Well, first of all, I want to say that there was a book I wrote for partners called Pro Dependence. That's pro dependence because I'm not a fan of the codependency label. And sometimes some partners groups, depends on which one, will be very accusatory to you. What did I do to cause this? How is it that I'm there? Should I be there? Should I not be there? What did I miss? I should have known. And so when partners are blaming themselves, they sometimes will go to support groups, and that's great. But I don't want it put back on you ever. Well, if you just done this or you just done that, or you are never, ever, ever responsible for my behavior. So there's nothing you can do to cause me to act out. You may be responding to my acting out, but there's nothing. So I wrote Pro Dependence, and I really, really recommend reading it because every spouse, I think, in somewhere in their head says, oh, is it something in my family? Is it something in my history? How could you not doubt yourselves? So I do recommend that. Something else I wrote. Did I lose my question here? I lost my question. Give me a time stamp, Tim.
524,
Five,
anonymous attendee.
Oh, okay, great.
It's an
There was one.
open.
Oh, masturbation. So,
Yeah.
you have resources to gather this information. I don't think it's a general, is this good? Is there not good? I wouldn't put that in a book. And I don't think anybody, it's about you. So, who are the people who know you best, who will hold you accountable as an addict? So, for example, and this was my experience, I'm a little embarrassed about it, but when I was in early recovery, my sponsor said, if you're going to be sexual, I want to know it, meaning I planned it in advance. It wasn't impulsive. And then after you're sexual, I want to know how it went, maybe the next day. And they don't want to hear about my sex life. They want to hear, did you feel drawn into returning the behavior? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check with someone. And I mean someone who knows me well. I don't know you well, but you have a sponsor, you have a therapist, they know you well. Tell them or ask them, what do you think about this for me? Number two, I'm going to do this. Is it okay with you? Do you think it's a good idea? No, I know it's weird to ask someone else if you could have sex, but if you're an addict, all bets are off. We don't do well on our own. So number one, I would check it out with someone who really knows you. Number two, I would check it out at the beginning and end. I can't tell you what's right or wrong. For some clients, it sends them right back out there. I would suggest if you're in a partnership that if you're going to masturbate, don't do it alone. You can be together and masturbate if that's what you choose to do. And by the way, if you don't feel like being sexual, one of you can hold the other. One can be, but I think when I go off on my own and I hide in the office, and that's probably doing it in isolation is not going to help. It's going to make things worse. One more thing, devices. I don't know what that means, and I don't need to know, but some people, they like certain devices and it is acceptable for them. And it is okay. I'm not sure in very early recovery it'd be okay, but people get to integrate all parts of their sexuality back into what they shared with someone else. unless it leads back to their addiction. And then they have to really question it, check it out. So I can't tell you what's right or wrong for you. I can't tell you they have a lot of resources around you that you can check it out. And also after you do or don't, you can look back and say, did this work or not, in real time.
And since you're the betrayed partner that's asking, it's so
Right. Sorry, I'm speaking the addict.
yeah, right. I was wondering what we are deciding, and so my wondering is, how do you feel about this as a betrayed partner? Like, what, do you have feelings about it? Do you have, concerns, or, like, and no devices? And to me, I was thinking immediately, not taking the phone with me, so that there's an access to porn, et cetera. So yeah, I think it's a very good discussion point. I love what
Hmm.
Dr. Rob was saying about like the checkpoints, check-ins. Like it could be, I'm going to go masturbate. That's what we've agreed to. I'm going to tell you afterwards how I feel, partner, if that is part of what you want to do. I mean, it really needs to be. I love that you're having a conversation. I love that you're doing well, and that you're
Right.
at this point where we're wondering about this. We're wondering about this. It isn't
Hmm.
the addict partner going like, well, I think I'm ready to do this. I'm grateful you're here doing that. And and you know what? It's like there can be parameters, and you try. And if he goes, oh, that was a little too close to, the scary stuff. Okay, well then, that not yet, not now. So, or it went fine, but I need to have these parameters so that I feel good about that too. So.
And real quick, I want to back up what
Mhm.
Tammy said, because 2.5 years is about the time when I would really saying we love each other, we're working on this. Can we, and in what ways might we consider being physically engaged? And the other thing I'd have is go to couples therapy. This is a question for how do you feel about it? What's going to happen? How do you manage it? Bottom line, I wouldn't take this on alone. Ask us,
Yes.
great, but I think you need other people involved in your life to ask that question. Okay.
Well, well, hang on, but they said they're starting couples therapy, and I made an assumption, which I shouldn't, that your couples therapist is a CSAT qualified to work within this arena, understands addiction, et cetera. And that would be really important. And one more thing, that your couples therapist has releases to talk to your individual therapist, and there's a plan so that it's team the two of you, so that they're working on navigating, everything for you.
And
Okay.
an exit plan. If you start
Ye-
engaging with each other in a sexual way and one of you feels uncomfortable, stop and discuss before. If I feel this way, if I feel I don't want to continue, and that's something you've talked about before. Okay.
I've used porn for emotional regulation since I was 12. I'm 25 now and know almost no other ways to as reliably regulate myself. How can I have a healthy relationship with my lust when porn is just as intertwined with actual sex as real love is, if not more so? My life is falling apart because of this addiction, and I'm trying my hardest to separate myself from unhealthy habits, but it feels like navigating a maze blindfolded, since I know I need some form of healthy relationship with sex, lust.
Well, we all need a healthy relationship with sex and lust, but we need it coming from a place of stability. We need coming from a place that doesn't make us hate ourselves, that doesn't make your life fall apart. So um, it is healthy for all of us to be sexual. It's healthy to eat, but in what way are you doing it? How does it make you feel? All of that stuff. By the way, I'm not going to, Tammy, I know you prefer people just write anonymous, but I do notice this is probably a woman, and I
I,
am
I I
so,
noticed that too, and I've got some resources for females specifically. So yeah, I hear you.
and I just want to say I'm so grateful to you for being here, because there are so many women who who are who are too ashamed to show up for this. They hate themselves so much. And let's face it, what is our culture call a guy who's having a lot of sex, and what does our culture call a woman who's having a lot of sex? So it's inherently so much more shameful. I will say this to you that's very direct: stop using porn. That's easy. You think you got a drinking problem, stop drinking. And I may sound like, well, that's easy, that's simple for you to say. Yes, but I can tell you the steps to get there. And my question is, are you taking them, sort of back to what this person said before, which is, I'm accountable and fully willing. Well, I know you want to do these things, but what are you doing? So bottom line is stop. Stop being sexual. Stop the porn use. Be abstinent for a period of time. And you will not be able to do that without support, meaning 12-step programs, therapy, all of that. Um, And stuff is free. You can go to lots of 12-step programs and get it for free, podcast information. There was something else that you had in there. Is oh, how can I have a healthy relationship when lust and porn is as intertwined with actual sex as love? Stop. Everything in here tells me I have all these questions about myself. I don't know what to do. Well, you'd know a lot more if you just stopped. And again, I'm not saying that's easy, but like before, how many steps? Am I doing this? Am I doing that? I guess I want to say one more thing, which is I work with addicts who are an outpatient, and they say, oh well, I had a slip, and it's awful, and I hate myself, and what do I do? And they're expecting me to say, to do this. And what I say is, well, maybe you need to go to more therapy. Maybe you need to go to more groups. In other words, if you're struggling, do more. And I'm not saying everyone can afford this. That's why we do inexpensive classes. That's why we give away so much for free. But I suggest you in one way or another, you're not going to be. It's like the person who's drinking and says, which one is it? Do I deal with the sex? You can't deal with the sex until you're drinking, and you're never going to know how to have a healthy, meaningful relationship. And I'm guessing there's some trauma underneath this, or some abuse or other issues that drive this. You're really not going to know any of the meaning of this for you unless you stop. And the last thing is that I hear you surrounded by shame. I just hear it all through there. And yet this desire for love, and your desire for love, your desire for healthy sexuality, give you a pat on the back, but you don't know how to have it. So maybe you need to step or two back and say, I'm not ready for those things yet, and I really want to have them, and I hope I'll be ready soon. What you got, Tammy?
So I'm going to hit send on the resources I found for you. We have a drop-in group for women, and assuming
Ooh.
from the name that's on there, we have a drop-in group free on Tuesday nights. So I'm going to send you the link for that. And I ran across a group that is starting for female, and I found that one, and I will insert that too. And here's the deal: you will be uncomfortable. You're saying I'm emotionally dysregulated. Well, yeah, and all addicts are, like
Mm,
if we're using that to emotionally regulate, it doesn't work. It's a maladaptive coping mechanism. So are we going to be mightily uncomfortable? Yup. And guess what? There's apps like the Calm app. I'm just, using one, but we talk all the time about I love the 478 breathing, but the 5 things I see, the 4 things I hear, like there's so many grounding and regulating things that, if you go, oh, I'm emotionally dysregulated, I want to go use this, I'm going to choose. It's very empowering. Like that's a compulsive thing. I feel like I have to do that. No, I'm going to choose to do these things. Debbie McCrae, and she talks about stuff for betrayed partners, but I would invite you to check out her webinars that are on our site because she talks about lots of techniques for helping get grounded. So you can use the tools. They work universally, but she talks about having an emergency kit. When I am dysregulated, I need my emergency kit. And you have one, in 8 different places, in your car and at your office desk, in in a manner where it doesn't say emergency kit because I feel like doing this, but it's what it is, and it's so that you can go, this is what I need to do. Have it on your phone, have it be, the wallpaper on your phone. This is what I'm going to do, whatever. But it's like, and if you go, this one works better than that one, okay, great. Or I have like 6 things I can try, and if that one's not working for me, or I'm standing in the grocery store, then I'm going to do this because it's discreet. There's all kinds of things. One of the things that,
mm.
like looping thoughts, Deputy McCrae talks about, stop it.
Tapping.
It works. Well, but stop
Mhm.
it, stop it, stop it. You do that, I think it was 7 times. I did it like 45 seconds. It really worked. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. I use it myself. I put my feet on the ground and get grounded. Like I'm paying attention to what I need to do to get grounded. So I'm not thinking about whatever it is that I, worried about thinking about. So is it a change? Absolutely. Is it uncomfortable? Yes, because all of a sudden we're experiencing the things that we were really avoiding. And guess what? I didn't die. I didn't die, feeling
Right.
those unpleasant, emotions.
Right.
I couldn't handle big negative emotions or big happy emotions. It was all just too much. But I learned, and the people, like Dr. Rob said, the people at 12 step, the people around me, like they helped me. They helped me figure that out. And then I was able to make healthy choices about lots of other things too. But I used all kinds of stuff, inappropriately, shall we say, in my active addiction. I don't have to anymore. I use healthy
Addictions.
things. Yeah, addictions.
No, I
Yes,
say
with
that
a
because
big
you had
S.
more than one
No, I do.
resource.
I have, well, but I have more than one addiction.
I wanted to add one other thing because number
Please.
one is, could you say to yourself, I want to act out, I'm going to act out, but I'll do it later.
Oh, good.
Can you
I
just
love that
say,
delay one. Yeah, that's a
and
good
this
one
thing
too.
that Tammy talks about, I'm committed to acting out whenever I want, but first I'm going to pick up this meditation book. I rarely meet an addict who continues to want to act out once time has gone by. So if you can give it an hour, if you can give it 2 hours, I have a feeling you won't want to do that anymore. This is like eating where you're going to stay hungry. This will pass, especially with emotional regulation. You will take a walk, you'll watch, something will happen, you'll begin to get regulated because life does that. And all of a sudden it won't be as important to you. And maybe that's the thing is say, I can do this, but I have to wait 2 hours. You're not saying to yourself, I won't do this, because that can make you a little crazy. But you can say, I can and I will, but there's this thing I need to do in the middle. The other thing, and this occurred to me when I was listening to you, is when I used to act out a lot, I was depressed a lot. And I used to think to myself, truly, I remember this, am I depressed because I act out? Or am I
Mhm.
acting out because I'm depressed? And I would go back and forth. And I acted out, I was depressed. And I depressed it, I acted out. And then I realized I have to stop acting out. That's something I can have control over. And then if I'm still depressed, I can go see a doctor, I can go deal with it. But again, while I'm doing this thing that leaves me being depressed, how am I ever going to know what's really going on? So they do need to be separated. Something you absolutely can do something about is the acting out. But this back and forth about, well, I'm feeling this because of that, or that made me really crazy. And then I realized it didn't matter. So, okay, I really want to make sure we
Okay.
cover 5:30 if we can, but I understand we have two.
We're going to get to both of them because we can stay
Okay,
another
good,
minute or two if we have
good,
to.
good.
So, do some addicts continue to live behind the mask of being a good husband? Me leaving has not triggered him to look into his SA issues. I realize I'd rather be alone and co parent our young kids than stay married to him. Moving out has given me so much peace. How often do trade partners divorce and the addict decides to finally get help? I also
Oh,
think even if he did, I wouldn't want to be with him again, as this has been a 6 year journey of pain and self healing, no help from him. Again, the statistics don't know, but you're, I mean, who cares? You're not a statistic. You're you.
oh,
You're
good.
telling me, you know, even if he got help, like that train has passed. I'm done. And you'd rather co-parent. Would it be wonderful if he got help now so that he could do a better job of co-parenting your children? Absolutely. And he's going to do what he's going to do and not do what he's, not going to do. Dr. Rob mentioned it earlier, there's a lot of addicts that come, to residential treatment and they're on their, second or third marriage, and they realize that had they chosen to get help, at marriage number one, they could have saved that relationship, but they didn't. Well, that ship has sailed too, so here's where you are now, and everybody else is kind of irrelevant. I honor that, that you did the right thing. You have peace. What a gift. I mean,
Mhm.
no, I can imagine how much better you are able to be present with your children, and yourself, because you're at peace. So I honor that.
I just have a couple of things to say. First of
Mhm.
all, I'm so glad you're here, and I think you're asking all the right questions. But in this case, I'm more interested in how you feel. And I thought the first thing hit me is it is to be noted that you feel more at peace on your own. That is something I think you can really look at, because it's not that all partners are in struggle. And of course, when you have some distance from it, you feel better. But this is living apart. This is having your kids. And so to me, I would that's the most important thing that I see. But there are a couple of other things, which is if you end the relationship, are they going to get help? I don't know. Maybe they will, and maybe they won't. You have to leave the relationship because you've done what you've done and you are in a place that you are. They may do something, they may not. They may say, I don't care, I'm glad they left. They may say, I'll do anything. And then you get to decide, well, even if they do everything, do I want to be out? But this idea that, and I said this before, that what you do is going to influence the decisions I make, and my decisions will hopefully make you live differently. You can't you can't make anyone do anything. And so make your decisions for yourself. Yes, we live behind a mask of being good people, but we're lying. I would watch carefully. You moved out and he's still acting out. I would have some concerns about that. So, and the last thing is, you do not need more pain. You do not mean more pain. And actually, I will never stop because I have one more. One of the saddest stories I heard from a spouse not that long ago was she said, I can be with the kids and I really can. I can be cheerful. I can be support. When I'm in with them, I am focused on them and I enjoy it. And it's my responsibility no matter what he is doing. But when I leave those kids, I'm not able to enjoy being a mom. I have to leave that room and I can't say, oh, we had so much fun and this and that. I'm thinking, is he coming home? And so I don't get to have the joy for yourself of being a mother because you're so taken up with all of this. And that actually was a really sad thing for me to hear. Okay.
Okay, last question. Are you finding that therapists and therapy, inpatient and outpatient practitioners are moving away from the codependent stance and toward prodependent lens? Just curious, as I see programs based solely on codependent and nothing about prodependence. Thanks.
Tammy?
So, so for SEOs on websites, they're still using codependence, and that makes sense from a marketing. But I do ask. I've reached out to lots and lots of therapists, and I share that we work from a prodependent lens, and some are going, what does that mean? I'm trained through APSATS, which is the partner organization, and while they don't use prodependence, they are looking at it from a trauma stance, so they are not using codependence. There are unfortunately a number of people who, I hear it, and there's a whole bunch of therapists that are on my no list, because they
And they're
still,
never.
yeah, well, and if they get a clue, that could change, but they're still in the, what did you do? I heard something tragic the other day about, like you need to forgive him. And it was really not helpful, very traumatizing actually. So unfortunately, when I was at ITAP, I was actually at ITAP for more than 10 years, which is where I met Dr. Rob. He, we often said we can take a good therapist and give them training and they can be a very good CSAT. But if somebody's not a good therapist, the training was not going to make them into a great CSAT, so that isn't going to help. It is the ones that are engaged and able to look at things. I hear all kinds of stories, so I won't go into that. But there are a lot of them that are like, oh, I'm not going to do a disclosure because if I had done a disclosure, then my wife would have left me. I heard that one recently. Like there's that kind of stuff that is unfortunately even in the CSAT organization. So then take that outside the CSAT organization to non-trained therapists who, it's just, it's the Wild West. And so, we work really hard at giving referrals based on the information that I know about, the therapist and that I'm gleaning so that we can do our best. And I do every now and then hear from someone that updates me, and it's sad when I hear a, I do verify a really negative comment about that. As far as treatment programs, I still hear there's a major one that the paperwork starts for the partner.
You make
What
more
is
money if you
your
call it.
part in this? That was the paperwork for the partner. What is your part in this? What are you going to do for your healing? And it was, but from a like to take responsibility for your actions and how you caused this. That's a major residential treatment program, and they are very codependent. So unfortunately, that's still out there a lot. But there's a lot of therapists who are, even if they aren't using the codependent language, they understand that codependency is pathologizing and taking the responsibility off the addict and putting it on someone else who doesn't even know about this. So there's been a good shift. There's a lot more work to do. We're committed to it. Dr. Rob does trainings regularly of other mental health professionals whenever he can get in front of a bunch of therapists and help them learn. And
Or
rarely
regular
it,
folks.
yeah, but for therapists that are doing this work,
Mm.
in the times he's done it, there was a couple times, and he had hundreds of people in the audience, and there would be one or two people that would write the nasty review about like, like they were so married to codependence, they were offended by that he was looking at it from another lens. But that's so rare. When the therapists are hearing and they can see the difference in the language and how it can be helpful, they do seem to gravitate towards it.
I just want to say that a very basic difference so you can understand what we're talking about. And Tammy said it really well. Addiction does affect everyone in the family. There's no question about it. And there's a bunch of stuff I want to say. The idea of codependency simply says, how did you contribute to this problem? You as a spouse, what did you do? What did you say? How did you act? What is it in your past? So codependency meaningfully says you are part of the problem and you need to look at your part. And if you don't, it will continue. I think that's accusatory. I think that's labeling. I think that you're good people who love your spouse and you would do anything, no matter how crazy it looks, to try to get them to be well. So my response is more, whatever you did out of love. And whatever you did it to try to make the relationship work. Was it crazy? Did it look nuts? Did you, and I hear this all the time, spouses say, I became someone I never wanted to be. Well, why did you become that person? Because I'm living through craziness. So the difference between codependency and codependence is codependence says, I am reacting to this crazy situation. And I may look crazy in the moment because I am, but because of what's happening, rather than I am causing what's happening or what is my part in this. Now, I'll just say one thing. Do we do crazy? Does my trauma issue, whatever it is, come up when I'm dealing with a crisis in my life? You bet. Do I have to look at what those issues were and how they had affected me? And no, because they don't really come up unless I'm under huge stress. And, volunteering to look at yourself is that word. It's volunteering. Am I curious about what happened to me? And am I curious about how I acted when I was affected by this? But number one, no one is responsible for anyone else's behavior. You can say, I can say you're awful to me. I hate you. You ruined my life. Look at all these things you did. But my desire to go act out and doing it is never because of you. And spouses, please hear that I say that I'm pounding on the desk. There is nothing you can do to make us act out. You can make us miserable. You can make us whatever it is. But the decision to, I'm going to do this instead of going for a walk. I'm going to do this instead of calling a friend. I'm going to do this rather than get separated is an excuse. And I'll tell you, the one absolute thing that addicts will all act out over is entitlement. I deserve to do this because X, Y, Z. And there is nothing that addicts like better than codependency because it points at the spouse and they say, well, see how I do this? Because look at what my spouse is and look at how they treat me. What else is a guy to do or a woman to do? It is not your responsibility and not your fault. What is your responsibility is how you act. Are you throwing dishes? Are there things that are meaningfully abusive? Or, yeah, you need to look at, are there things that I'm doing that are horrible, horrific, but you are not contributing to the problem. You are reacting to the problem. So last thing I want to say is I have a doctorate. Woohoo, me, I got it at 58. By the way, I went back to school and my doctorate was about codependency and the relationship with the things I'm talking about. And I interviewed, 37 or 40 therapists, and they all agreed that they all said in one way or another, I'm not sure what codependency is. Or I have my name for it, but I'm not sure what they name it. Or I read the book in 1987 and I follow that. Or I read the book in 2000. So since there is no meaningful definition and we all disagree about what it means, I think that's something to take a good look at. I know what depression is. I know lots of things related to mental health, but I don't really know what codependency is because everyone has a different opinion. And if I say you're codependent, I don't know what that means. There's no criteria. It isn't, in an identification book. It isn't in our diagnostic manuals. It doesn't exist formally. So just because the last thing I'll say, I promise, is that when I approached these therapists and I said, what are you doing? Do you like codependency? Do you like the model? Do you think it fits your work? Almost all of them said, well, I call it that, but I don't do that anymore. I do it this way. And so what Tammy said, I think is really important, which is ask them, how do you see my role? Before you go to therapy, how do you see my role? What do you see my part? How have I contributed to this? Or do you think I'm reacting to it? And listen to what they say. Because you can interview therapists before you start to see them. And this would be my question for any therapist is, do you see me having meaningfully contributed to this problem and escalated it? Or do you see me reacting to the nightmare that I'm living in? And I think that will tell the tale. I wrote a great book. I think I wrote a great book. Do we teach a course? I don't know if we teach a course, Tammy. In Betrayed Partners.
The Betrayed Partner, yes, it's what
Right.
we have. And Angela does a great job from a codependent lens for betrayed partners. We have podcasts on it. We've got webinars. We've got lots of resources on it. All of our drop-in groups are done from a codependent lens. When I'm subbing in and someone says, well, I know I'm codependent, I hard stop and go, we don't use that language here. We talk from this, and I do the explanation. We really work hard at holding that space. So
We got through
okay.
all of them.
We did. We stayed
All right.
late. Thanks for all of you that stayed late too. This recording will be posted on our website tomorrow. And join us next week. Thanks, Dr.
Love
Rob.
working with you, Tammy. Good to see you.
Bye.